on an American proposal to recognize Russia's control of Crimea as part of a ceasefire agreement. That led Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as I mentioned a moment ago, to pull out of today's talks in London. The Kremlin first seized Crimea in 2014, using the territory as a staging ground for its full-scale invasion 2 years ago. Joining us now, former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. He now serves as Norway's Minister of Finance and is in Washington for the IMF World Bank meetings, where President Trump's tariffs will be a main topic of discussion. Minister Stoltenberg, thanks for being with us this morning. We always appreciate it. Want to talk about the world economy in just a moment, the impact of tariffs around the world. But let's go back to your former role for a moment, if we could, as the head of NATO and these talks. Where do you see them standing right now between Russia and Ukraine, the American role in them, and where do you think they're headed?
First of all, I think it's important to support efforts to try to end this war. We all want the war to end. But at the same time, we know that the quickest way of ending a war is to lose a war. But that will not bring peace. That will bring occupation. So what we need to ensure is that there's a way to end the war where Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation. And the only way to get there is to convince President Putin that he will not win on the battlefield. He has to sit down and negotiate a fair and lasting peace. And the only way to get there is to ensure that Ukraine has the strength on the battlefield to convince Putin that he has to negotiate a fair deal.
Minister Stoltenberg, is the United States a good partner in NATO's efforts to end the war with Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, of course, there are discussions inside the alliance, and I'm not longer the Secretary General of NATO. But what we have seen is that NATO allies, including the United States, have provided unprecedented military support to Ukraine. European allies are actually providing more and more. Roughly half the military aid is coming from European allies and Canada. We need all of them, also the United States, to continue to support Ukraine, because military support to Ukraine creates the conditions for a lasting peace. The stronger Ukraine is on the battlefield, the stronger they will be around the negotiating table.
Mr. Stoltenberg, good morning. The theme of whether America is a good partner or not, let's apply that to economic issues as well, and your role as finance minister in Norway. We know President Trump has engaged in these tariffs against economic rivals and friends alike. We have seen the impact on the market here in the United States and the economy. What is your reaction to them? Is this the way? Is this helpful for a nation like yours? Is this helpful to the global economy if the United States is ramping up pressure on what up until recently what we'd all suggest would be economic friends?
Well, Norway has a small, open economy. Roughly half of what we produce do we export to other countries, and this is the same in many other European countries. So we are dependent and have been dependent on trade for centuries. So therefore, we believe in free trade. We believe in as low tariffs as possible, and we think that has benefited all of us. I recognize the need to address security challenges related to imports, trade with authoritarian regimes. So therefore, the US was right in criticizing Europe for being too dependent on Russian gas, and to address the security challenges when it comes to being too dependent on rare earth minerals from China. But trade between friends and allies, that's something that benefits us all. And therefore, Norway believes in free trade because it makes us all winners.
I understand, Mr. Minister, you'll meet tomorrow at the White House along with the Prime Minister of Norway, with President Trump, a man you know, a man you've dealt with in your previous role as the head of NATO. What will be your message to him?
That we need to keep North America and Europe together because in a more dangerous world, not least in addressing the challenges from China, we need to stand together. The United States is big, 25% of the global economy, but together with all the NATO friends and allies, together we are 50% of the global economy and 50% of the global military might. So also the United States get stronger by having friends and allies, and that's also the reason why China and Russia always try to divide us and to undermine the North Atlantic bond.
Norwegian Finance Minister and former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. We appreciate it. And up next on Morning Joe, Democratic Governor Maura Healey of Massachusetts will weigh in on the feud between Harvard and the Trump administration after the university.
James stealing the ball from T-Wolf superstar Anthony Edwards, laying it in to pad the Lakers' lead near the end of the fourth quarter. LeBron added 21 points to the game-high 31 scored by Luka Doncic last night. The Lakers rebounding from Saturday's blowout loss to Minnesota, winning last night 94-85 in Game 2 to even the series. Meanwhile, in Memphis, the Oklahoma City Thunder never trailed the Grizzlies last night, following up their easy win on Sunday. Easy, putting it mildly, they won by 50. And last night, winning by 19, 118-99. Over in the Eastern Conference, the Pacers notched a second win at home over the Bucks, beating Milwaukee 123-115, going up 2-0 there. In the NHL, a dominant start for the defending Stanley Cup champions at home last night. Matthew Tkachuk scoring twice in his long-awaited return to the Florida lineup. The Panthers beat the Tampa Bay Lightning 6-2 in their Eastern Conference first-round series opener. A little intrastate battle there in Florida. In New Jersey, the Devils dropped their second straight against the Hurricanes, falling to Carolina 3-1 last night. They're now in that 0-2 hole. In Toronto, the Maple Leafs blew a 2-0 lead over the Senators in regulations, but then rallied to beat Ottawa in overtime 3-2. They now lead the series 2-0. In the Western Conference, the Minnesota Wild riding a 3-goal first period to a 5-2 road victory over the Las Vegas Golden Knights. That series now tied at 1 game apiece. In Major League Baseball, go to Minnesota. The Twins cling to a 2-run lead over the White Sox in the top of the ninth inning. Chicago, 2 outs, 2 runners on base.
Once again, Duran to Benintendi. The 2-2 in the air to right center field. Buxton on the move to his left. Buxton will dive, and he caught the ball. Buxton caught the ball. Twins win. Twins win.
Wow, a walk-off diving catch. Game-saving catch. Byron Buxton's diving grab in center field seals a 4-2 win for the Twins. Nice play there. Let's get back and focus on the AL East, where our focus belongs.
Always.
You know, we're kind of muddling along a little bit, our two teams. The Red Sox only a half game behind the Yankees for first place. Yankees have lost a couple in a row after a win streak. We should point out the New York Mets are on fire right now, tied for the best record in baseball. How do we feel about our teams, though?
Yeah, briefly on the Mets, 17-7, as you say, tied with the Padres. Pete Alonso having a monster start. Juan Soto's numbers, pedestrian for him at this point.
He'll get there.
But the protection he adds to the way he lengthens that lineup, Alonso benefiting Lindor hot as well. And the AL East, it's bunched. All 5 teams within 4.5 games of each other. Orioles, real pitching issues. Rays have slumped. And there we go. Red Sox and Yankees, both with 14 wins. I'll just note, Aaron Judge hitting .411.
Yeah, he's doing his thing.
But he did have a shaky play in the outfield last night, which led to some Guardians runs. Red Sox have been... they've been okay. Walker Buehler was terrific on the Patriots Day matinee. They got some offense last night late. I think it's going to be, there's Alex Bregman double down the line. It's going to be a fun playoff race this year. We haven't had a good Red Sox-Yankees battle in a while. Neither team great, but good enough. I think we'll get it this year.
Yeah, let's go down the stretch all the way deep into September and October. And let's shout out the Cubs. Cubs in first place, too, playing well early on.
You're being way too positive, Jonathan.
I know. Well, Joe's not here, so I'm...
Still ahead, President Trump appears to soften his stance on Fed Chair Jerome Powell and the trade war with China. We'll take a look at how markets are responding this morning. Plus, what billionaire Elon Musk is saying about wrapping up his work within the Trump administration. Morning Joe is back in a moment.
In spending federal dollars. This is something that I'm going to answer you, but if you want to know, that's okay, but I just want to answer you. Are you going to allow me to answer the question? What they are examining right now is inefficiency in the federal system. This is something that President Obama wanted to do when President Obama was elected president of the United States. You can do it if you want to, but those are the facts.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you a question.
Justin, it's all right. I got it. All right. Shut up. Let's roll. Elon Musk and Doge have been authorized by the President of the United States. If you're going to have a conversation about policy, then chances are I'm going to make a question. Donald Trump, we were actually given a briefing on this. It is a fact that 60% of the calls into Social Security are fraud-based. It's true.
Whoa, Republican Congressman Byron Donalds faced a contentious crowd of constituents this week during a town hall in Florida, where he was grilled about Doge cuts. That comes as Elon Musk appears to be reconsidering the amount of time that he's spending on Doge amid a financial freefall for Tesla. Also ahead, we'll bring you the latest on the second Signal scandal involving Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth as the White House continues to show support for him, plus a major economic news from President Trump and his administration, driving a massive rally on Wall Street. We'll go through the president's comments on the future of the Fed chair and trade negotiations with China. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Wednesday, April 23rd. With us, we have the co-host of our fourth hour and contributing writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, U.S. special correspondent for BBC News, and the host of The Rest is Politics podcast, Katty Kay, co-founder and CEO of Axios, Jim Vandehei, and New York Times opinion columnist David French. Early this morning, Pope Francis's body was transferred to St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. The procession marked the start of a 3-day mourning period. Church bells rang as the Pope's coffin was brought to the Basilica. This is a live look right now, where worshipers are paying their final respects. Francis's body will lie here in state until Friday evening. He will be buried on Saturday. World leaders, including President Trump, are expected to attend the funeral.
Meanwhile, the markets are reacting to yesterday's comments from President Trump and members of his administration. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told investors in a closed-door meeting the president's trade war with China is, quote, not sustainable. According to a person in the room, Bessent said he expects there will be a de-escalation in the very near future, but acknowledged negotiating with China is likely to be a slog. Later in the day, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt echoed the Treasury Secretary's optimism, adding the administration was setting the stage for a deal, although neither official suggested those negotiations actually have even begun. President Trump was asked about trade talks yesterday at the White House.
I'm not going to say, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice. They're going to be very nice. And we'll see what happens. But ultimately, they have to make a deal. 145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. It used to be zero. We were just destroyed. China was taking us for a ride, and just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're going to be very good to China.
The president also walked back his attacks in part on Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, days after posting online Powell's termination can't come soon enough, in the words of the president there. Yesterday, Trump said he never was actually going to fire Powell.
None whatsoever. Never did. The press runs away with things. No, I have no intention of firing him. I would like to see him be a little more active in terms of his idea to lower interest rates. This is a perfect time to lower interest rates. If he doesn't, is it the end? No, it's not. But it would be good timing. It could have taken place earlier. But no, I have no intention to fire him.
So, meanwhile, the White House says more than a dozen countries have brought the administration written trade proposals, and several foreign leaders are setting meetings this week to discuss potential deals.
I spoke to our entire trade team this morning. There is a lot of progress being made. We now have 18 proposals on paper that have been brought to the trade team. Again, these are proposals on paper that countries have proposed to the Trump administration and to our government. You have Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick, Ambassador Greer, NEC Director Hassett, and Peter Navarro, the entire trade team, meeting with 34 countries this week alone. We're doing very well in respect to a potential trade deal with China. As I mentioned, there have now been 18 proposals in more than 100 countries around the world who are wanting to make a deal with the United States of America. And the president and the administration are setting the stage for a deal with China.
So while questions still remain on negotiations with China, the White House is reportedly close to general trade agreements with Japan and India. The details of the trade deals are still being worked out. According to Politico, the agreements are closer to memorandums of understanding or a broad architecture for future deals. Jim Vandehei, you guys are writing about what's happening behind the scenes and what sort of led to this moment here, saying that President Trump got a scare from CEOs and the markets on Monday. What has led to what we're seeing today?
Yeah, I think the important takeaway would be in the last 24 hours, I'd say for the first time, we feel like in talking to White House officials, they're starting to make progress in persuading Trump that what he did early on was too dangerous and is really having ramifications that go beyond what he was seeing in his line of sight. Very important meeting yesterday in the White House. You had the CEOs of Walmart, Target, Home Depot with the president, warning him very bluntly, saying, listen, like, you're going to have price increases soon. You're going to have empty shelves in a lot of our stores.
Like in 2 weeks.
Like in 2 weeks. And you're going to have smaller companies going under because they're so reliant on trade, and that hasn't showed up yet at the stores, but it will soon. And I think the combination of that, watching the markets, hearing from other CEOs across different sectors saying the same thing, does appear, and I put quotes around appear because the president really is dug in on tariffs as a theory, but at least the White House officials who are trying to persuade him are. And that is an important thing to note about Trump. Like, if someone who runs a company as a CEO, you need people around you who will look at you and say, you know what, that's a dumb idea, and say it bluntly, or that's a dangerous idea, and say it bluntly. He doesn't have that. So when you're trying to persuade him, people have to either bring in other officials that he respects, or they have to say, no, sir, this is actually a genius idea if you move it this way. And so the process of moving him is taking a lot longer than those that don't like the policy internally would hope. So we'll see if he continues on this track, but certainly the comment on China, certainly the comment on Powell, the idea that was the media making it up that he wanted to fire him. They were reacting to his social media post where he basically called him a dog and said that he's a loser and shouldn't be in the gig. Like, is he saying he should be fired? No, but anyone else interpreting that might be fair to interpret it as that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, Trump said, quote, on Friday in a Truth Social post, Powell's termination cannot come soon enough. That's pretty explicit. He also called him a loser a couple of days ago. But, John, what are you hearing about the turn here, from a little bit of a turn in rhetoric, at least, from the president about Powell yesterday, about China? Obviously, the markets have tanked because of these tariffs. They tanked even more when he started threatening the job of Jerome Powell. Someone got
fire the head of the Fed. Let's be clear, he did. And you can't, the idea of a trade war with China is going to continue to sink the markets here. And Monday was a really rough day. We saw this rhetoric yesterday that at least momently gives a respite to Wall Street. But Caddy, I want to go to you on this because this is, we all know it, we say it a lot, the markets and also for other nations looking to deal with the United States, looking to have trade with the United States, what do they bank on? They want predictability, they want certainty, they want, there's some sort of sense as to we know where this is going. And even on a day where, yes, the markets cheered what Trump did, it's another 180. It is a constant shifting of stances, of language, and it's just so hard for any other nation to get their arms around it. And yes, I think at best we can say loose understanding of frameworks to deals. It's going to be hard to fill in those blanks.
Yeah, and the question now is the message we've had from the last 24 hours from Scott Bessent and from the president himself about Jerome Powell the end of the story? Is that the decision now going forward? It's no longer going to be the roller coaster, but the strategy has been set. Powell is not going to be fired. The Fed is going to maintain its independence. The tariff war is going to come down, and that a normal service, if you like, will be resumed. We don't know that yet. Trump seems to be more receptive to markets today than he was 3 weeks ago when he initially announced Liberation Day. Scott Bessent's going to be speaking at the International Monetary Fund later today for their spring meetings, and it's interesting that this is a kind of time where the international community has come to Washington. I was speaking to an IMF official a couple of days ago who said there's two real problems with how the world is seeing the White House at the moment. The world of financiers is seeing the White House at the moment. One is the policy. They don't like the policies of protectionism and these tariffs that are being put on countries around the world. But the second and the bigger problem is a question of competence. Is this White House competent when it comes to stewardship, not just of the American economy, but of the global economy? And I was told that that second issue is the bigger concern that other countries have with America at the moment.
The Wall Street Journal editorial board has a new piece entitled Up the Down Trump Tariff Escalator, and it reads in part, quote, if Mr. Bessent knows what Mr. Trump's real China and trade strategies are, everyone would love to hear it, because so far it looks like ad hoc improvisation. But we and the markets will take whatever good news we can get these days. So would businesses across the country that are freezing investment or not hiring as they try to figure out what will happen when Mr. Trump's 90-day pause on his highest non-China tariffs end. If Mr. Bessent can move markets merely with comments that a trade truce is coming, imagine how they would respond if Mr. Trump simply called the whole tariff thing off. And David French, I'll also read from Axios, reporters Mark Caputo and Ben Berkowitz really give a TikTok of what this editorial is talking about here. Listen, on Monday, the CEOs of three of the nation's biggest retailers, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, privately warned Trump in the Oval Office that tariff and trade policy could disrupt supply chains, raise prices, empty shelves. The big box CEOs flat out told Trump the prices aren't going up. They're steady right now, but they will go up, an administration official familiar with the meeting told Axios. And this wasn't about food, but he was told that shelves will be empty. Another official briefed on the meeting said the CEOs told Trump disruptions could become noticeable in 2 weeks. While that was happening, financial markets were slumping, stocks, bonds, the dollar, and investors panicked about Trump's latest threats to out Fed Chair Jerome Powell and step on the central bank's independence. And then yesterday, Trump turned the dial down. So David French, the markets and the business community, everybody, Jerome Powell is getting used to Trump believing something until he doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, let's just take a step back and look at how bizarre this all is. Essentially, what we have is the President of the United States hitting the economy with a hammer. That's what he's doing. He's just hitting the economy with a hammer. And people come in and they say, stop hitting the economy with a hammer, Mr. President. And he relents for a day or two, or he gives some indication that he might relent, and the markets surge. And then he goes right back to hitting the economy with a hammer again, and the markets fall. I mean, this is the dynamic that we're watching. And there's no apparent underlying plan, so that even if he stops for a moment, even if the market comes back for a bit because the indication is that he is not going to be as aggressive.
Yeah.
What kind of environment is that if you're going to be reshoring industry, if you're going to be asking people to make huge investments in the United States, when the president is just changing the economic conditions day by day, depending on his mood. I mean, there's a reason why incompetence is surging in people's minds as a concern about this administration.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, the Trump administration is standing by Defense Secretary Pete, despite growing calls for his resignation.
You don't have time for leakers. You are the leaker. You're the one who leaked this.
White House, though, continuing to stand by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth as concerns grow. He may have shared classified information about Yemen attack plans in 2 separate Signal group chats. NBC News has learned those attack plans were first sent to Hegseth by the head of the U.S. Central Command through a secure government system, not through Signal. But the chief Pentagon spokesperson denies Hegseth shared any classified information through his personal phone on Signal, making some kind of distinction there. Democrats now demanding Hegseth resign. The White House, though, making clear Secretary not going anywhere.
Secretary of Defense is doing a tremendous job, and he is bringing monumental change to the Pentagon. And there's a lot of people in this city who reject monumental change, and I think, frankly, that's why we've seen a smear campaign against the Secretary of Defense since the moment that President Trump announced his nomination before the United States Senate. Let me reiterate, the president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth in the change that he is bringing to the Pentagon, and the results that he's achieved thus far speak for themselves.
So, John, obviously he is the leaker. He someone invited the National Security Advisor, mistakenly invited Jeffrey Goldberg first. And in this second Signal group chat, reportedly spread to the friends and family Signal group. Above the fold, New York Times this morning, chaos builds at the Pentagon under Hegseth's control. It's not just this Signal story. In the past, the Trump administration's policy has just been to ride these things out. They'll go away. Something else will come along. It worked for them on this first round of Signal controversy with Hegseth. Any indication they're prepared to move him out?
Yeah, first let's be clear. It's deep dysfunction at the Pentagon right now. This is, of course, the secretary's handling of these Signal chats. He's had 4 top advisors leave in recent days as part of, as he sort of suggested there, a leak investigation. But these are people who are largely closely allied with Hegseth himself. These aren't deep state operatives, as the White House is trying to paint them as now. These are people who are close to him who are now being shown the door. Also some reporting that it was Hegseth himself who tried to give Elon Musk access to classified information about China, and President Trump had to step in and say, no, that Elon doesn't need to know that. Right now, though, there is real frustration within the building about Hegseth. The president unhappy. That said, to use their phrase, the rallying cry, no scalps. They don't want to show a popular cabinet member, and he is popular with the MAGA base, the door, particularly within the first 100 days. Yes, there has been some speculation in sort of the outer edges of Trump world about who could follow Hegseth. Some names are being floated, but right now Hegseth went on Fox yesterday. I'm told the White House thought he did reasonably well in that interview defending himself. Then the president, at least for now, is not inclined to push him out. But there are real questions as to what other shoes may still drop, and whether any other Republicans might say, look, enough is enough. We heard from one lawmaker over the weekend, on Monday, Congressman Bacon said, look, Hegseth needs to go. Congress still on recess. We'll see, though, as others, when they're pressed about Hegseth, whether they say, look, these are the concerns we had privately about his confirmation. We said yes, but now it's clear he's not the guy.
David French, you served in the United States Army. This just isn't a close call. You don't put attack plans in a Signal group chat. By the way, Pete Hegseth knows that. All the senators rallying to his defense know that. The people around the president know that. If this were a Democrat, we can only imagine, although we don't have to imagine, given their protests around Hillary Clinton's private server. But just your assessment of Pete Hegseth's time so far in this job beyond the Signal group chat, by the way.
No one should be surprised by the chaos that we're seeing. No one should be surprised that it appears he's out of his depth. I mean, we're getting reports already that in the building, it's not just that this like a smoothly run machine that has had a signal hiccup, that this is a very poorly run machine of which the signal scandals are an indicator of the broader problem. And I think that's really important to also note something else. Look, soldiers like it when senior leaders go out and do push-ups with them, and soldiers like it when senior leaders share some of their own own, burdens and share some of their own experiences. But you know what they really want senior leaders to do? Their jobs. They want senior leaders to be good at their jobs. And if you're sharing operational security on Signal, if the Pentagon is in meltdown mode all of the time, if you're having to go onto Fox to fight for your job every day, that is not telling the United States military that this man is in command of the situation, that this man is competent. And again, it keeps that word keeps coming back.
To his point, I think the fact that there are absolutely, seemingly no consequences to this, at the very least, shows such a lack of care for probably one of the most important facets of what protects this country, the Department of Defense. No consequences. This is our national security being treated with reckless disregard, with a cavalier attitude, with barbs back at the media. And I would think for our troops, for family members of anyone in the military, for any family member add to that, absolutely no accountability, none. Not taking any, blaming it on other people when it's obviously him. And even worse, hypocrisy. Here's Pete Hegseth, I think back in 2016, talking about others. Take a look.
Apparently, the standard operating procedure inside the Clinton Secretary of State office was to send emails that couldn't otherwise be printed to the maid to print them out of a secure area or from a secure area and then hand them off. Any security professional, military, government, or otherwise, would be fired on the spot for this type of conduct and criminally prosecuted for being so reckless with this kind of information. The fact that she wouldn't be held accountable for this, I think, blows the mind of anyone who's held our nation's secrets dear, who's had a top secret clearance like I have and others, who know that even one hiccup causes a problem, let alone a standard procedure like this.
Really? Wow. Just one hiccup causes a problem. Just one little one causes a problem.
He holds the secrets dear.
He knows so much about how it's important to be careful with our nation's secrets, to not chat about with other people about them, except his wife, his attorney, his brother, and Jeffrey Goldberg, Caddy K. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's pretty staggering listening to that tape. There is video for everything, it seems. And listening to Pete Hegseth in that video from 2016 being so outraged about Hillary Clinton and then now turning that outrage against the media and the leakers makes you realize that perhaps there's a little disingenuousness to what he's saying at the moment. Just a little touch. But Jim, what are those Republican senators who voted for Pete Hegseth, and he passed with the slimmest of margins, just with one vote, knowing that he was not competent for the job and having expressed already their reservations about him for the job, just in terms of his qualifications as a manager? He's never run anything as big and as important as this. What are you hearing their feeling at the moment?
I mean, listen, it's a split screen, right? It's the BS you hear in public, which is either supportive or silence, or it's what they tell you in private, right? Like almost most of the senators you talk to never thought he should be the defense secretary and think all of this is absurd. And I think you have to sit back and think about a couple things. One, every time that we talk about Republicans finally speaking out, it's Representative Bacon. It's a person. It is not the Republican Party. Almost nobody's speaking out. We've not found a single person who's talked to Trump who said Trump has talked about replacing him. So others seem to be reporting that, but we can't find anybody who's talked to Trump or Trump's talking about it. And then three is, we're not 100 days in. Like 4 people have left. Like the way leadership works, as someone who runs a company, like anything you see in the behavior of your people reflects the leader. And the fact that you're 90 days in, and not even 90 days in because it took several days to get confirmed and then to hire staff, that you have infighting almost instantly, ineptitude across the top of it, and then just like the leaking and the fact that this is the Defense Department having to talk about internal drama as opposed to protecting the American people speaks to a deep-seated problem.
Not how you run Axios, let alone the Defense Department.
I'd be fired if I ran that way. You just can't. And I think that is when the American public or folks in MAGA are like, oh, you guys got to stop picking on the cabinet officials. Like, this leadership matters profoundly. right? Like any organization reflects the people at the top. And especially when you're talking about vital organizations like the Defense Department, that's what concerns like the most serious Republicans who are sitting on armed services thinking about the dangers that the country faces. And this stuff eventually does bite you. Like having highly competent people doing their job on behalf of the American people is vital work. Vital work. And like, will Hegseth survive? He probably survives in the short term. It's hard to see him surviving long term because I think there's a lot of other investigative reporting going on. I think there's more embarrassments to come for him that the White House is going to have to deal with. Eventually, Trump does tire of people if it reflects poorly upon him. But this is your reality, at least for the foreseeable future.
Coming up, the governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, is our guest this morning. She's weighing in on the Trump administration's funding cuts to hospitals and universities, including several in her state. She joins the conversation just ahead on Morning Joe. The network has denied that claim. Trump has also called for CBS to lose its broadcast license. Joining us now, Editor-in-Chief for Semaphore, Ben Smith. You have a lot going on there, Ben, but let's talk about this first. I think this news at least hit the media community like a meteor. That was a message that Bill Owens was sending about what's happening at CBS. So what's happening at CBS?
Yeah, I mean, no, this was the latest in a series of, essentially capitulations by media companies to pressure from President Trump. And what's different from the environment in which we've operated for most of our careers, in which, by the way, there have been our share of media scandals and screw-ups and firings and quitting, is that the way it is happening now is there's pressure on the owners of media companies, whether it's Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, Patrick Soon-Shiong in Los Angeles, feeling pressure on their other interests to not annoy President Trump and changing their editorial policies, their content as a result. We reported last night that my colleague Max Taney reported that Owens quit after Sherry Redstone, the owner of the company, requested and looked at a list of stories about President Trump that 60 Minutes was planning to broadcast. This came after Trump complained about a 60 Minutes program about Ukraine, and in 60 Minutes, is the definitive television news magazine of an earlier era, and a huge symbolic moment. But Sherry Redstone's trying to sell this company, requires federal approval for the deal, and these are the kind of deals that media owners are making right now.
Yeah, so Ben, you've gotten there to the heart of the matter, which is that Paramount Global, where Sherry Redstone is the chairwoman, is trying to sell to Skydance Media, owned by Larry Ellison, need FCC approval for that. Donald Trump could theoretically and likely use that as leverage to try to stop that sale going forward. So now that top-down pressure coming from Sherry Redstone and Paramount down to 60 Minutes about the kinds of stories and the tone of the stories they're doing about Donald Trump. One way I heard it described was that this was Bill Owens just sending up a flare and really kind of falling on a grenade and giving up the job that he's held so well for so many years to put pressure and to make a public spectacle of what's going on at his company and others. So do you think this changes anything about the deal that's coming, perhaps, for Paramount and about the way that 60 Minutes does its job?
I wonder, I think the real question is what David Ellison, who runs Skydance, is going to do. The purchaser has a lot of leverage here. And, I think there is an illusion that they can let the people they're buying it from sort of neuter the news organization, take the heat, take the money, and move on. And I think what you see is you buy a company. I think, and you saw this with CNN's parent company, that if you try to ignore a huge mess and highly politicized scandal in your news division, you're going to have a tough few years. And I think it's incredibly naive that they think that they're just going to acquire this company, take the entertainment assets, have fun, and this whole thing will blow over.
Coming up, a preview of what's driving the day on Wall Street as markets look to extend yesterday's gains. CNBC Andrew Ross Sorkin has business before the bell. Straight ahead.
I hope they're going to tell us.
Yeah, I mean, the World Economy Summit is a huge gathering of CEOs here in Washington. We've been doing it for a couple of years, but I mean, for a lot of the reasons that were talking about earlier on the show, CEOs for whom coming to Washington had been an inconvenience, something they avoided, something they were able to avoid for many years. Now they have to be here because the U.S. government plays such a central role in the global economy. That obviously didn't begin with Trump. I mean, the IRA, Biden put enormous amounts of government money into the economy, but now the decisions of the president are for whether you're the economic leaders of France and Germany and Britain who will have, or whether you're the CEOs of companies like Uber who will be on our stage. You have to know what's happening here in Washington and have to try to understand it, which they hate, but which they will not, but which of course, as you said, there's a lot of pressure on them not to complain about.
Time now to take a look at some of the other stories making headlines this morning. Crews in New Jersey are fighting a fast-moving wildfire that has burned more than 3,000 acres. A stretch of the Garden State Parkway was shut down in Ocean City County, and thousands of people were evacuated there. The fire is still far from contained, and the cause is under investigation. And NBC News has discovered 3 days before Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's handbag was stolen while she dined at a Washington, D.C. restaurant. Another woman at a nearby restaurant had her purse taken in a similar manner. It's not clear if the two incidents are connected, but officials are now investigating. Noem's purse was stolen Sunday after a thief was able to scoot his chair close enough to slide the bag toward him, grab it, and leave the location. The purse contained Noem's driver's license, passport, her DHS access badge, and about $3,000 in cash. Coming up, Boy George is back on Broadway. He stars in Moulin Rouge, the musical, alongside actor and singer Jordan Fisher. They join right here in New York City for Time Magazine's 2025 Earth Awards. The event honors the individuals who have worked throughout the year to make an impact on the environment and climate. Our next guest will be honored today. Catherine Coleman Flowers is an activist who has worked for years to spread awareness and force change of inadequate and unhealthy wastewater infrastructure in rural communities across the country, including in her own hometown of Lowndes County, Alabama. In 2023, the Department of Justice found the state engaged in neglect regarding the county's sewage systems and agreed on a settlement to correct the problem. But this month, the Trump administration ended that agreement, claiming it was illegal because of DEI. Joining us now, 2025 Time Earth Award recipient and founder of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, Catherine Coleman Flowers. She was also featured on the Forbes and Know Your Value 2023 50 over 50 list, highlighting her work with environmental justice and all that work for your hometown and for the region. Gosh, what happened now that the Trump administration has put an end to all the steps that were taken?
Well, I think what is significant about this is that I think they, first of all, mischaracterized it as a DEI initiative. It's not a DEI initiative. There are a lot of poor families that are living in mobile homes that are straight piping raw sewage on the ground. And it's going to continue in this country and across America if this does not become a priority for the administration. I hope it does.
So let's look at your town, your county, Lowndes, and what you were trying to set a light on and what you did shed a light on was that 40% of majority Black residents were found without access to clean sanitation in America. Number one, that should be staggering. And what was the advocacy that you put into play to try and solve this problem, and where does it stand now?
Well, basically what we did was take people there to see it so they could know that it existed. Because I think the reason why these problems in rural America exist because it's away from the beaten path. People
Who
don't
did
get
you
to
bring?
oh, well, we brought everybody from Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Senator Jeff Sessions when he was a U.S. Senator. Actually, the first people that actually came to Lowndes County were Republican, led by Bob Woodson, who was very much a mentor in this process for me. But now...
So you get these Republicans there. Are they supportive of your initiative and what you're trying to shed a light on?
When I first started doing this over 20 years ago, it was largely Republicans that would go there and actually saw firsthand what was going on. But we've also invited people that are Democrats as well who've seen it, because it's not a partisan issue. This is America. And everyone in America should be able to flush their toilets and not see it in their front yard.
Right. So tell us what the state of, especially given the pullback from the Trump administration, not just for Loudoun County, but for other counties across America, what are you most concerned about in these political times with so many cuts taking place?
I'm just concerned that in America, there are going to be people in rural America in particular. And we've also seen, like yesterday we were in Mount Vernon, New York, where people had problems with sewage coming back into their homes, that we're going to still have this problem that should have been solved many, many years ago. And we're going to continue to advocate for change. And hopefully, we would like to invite the president himself to actually go to mobile homes in Lowndes County between Selma and Montgomery and see the problem, because I think once he sees it, he's going to want to fix it. If he doesn't, you know, he can't say he doesn't know about it.
He has talked about shower heads and flushing toilets, and have you made the invitation?
I'm making the invitation now.
Okay, so, and you'll be, of course, receiving this honor today in New York City. A sense of what's the message that you hope to send upon receiving this award?
Well, I think that people throughout America, especially rural America, should have access to dignity. And dignity means that when they flush their toilets, they shouldn't see the remains in their front yard, nor should they come back into their homes. And we're going to be pushing for innovation and equity as it relates to sanitation for all Americans.
And what is your specific invitation to President Trump?
President Trump, I'd like to invite you to come to Lowndes County, Alabama, and let me take you to see what these families are living with. And I believe that you can help us find a long-term solution to this problem and the funding that's necessary to make it happen.
I believe he's going to be in Alabama, maybe doing a commencement address, so perhaps you could work with his team and he could stop by. We'll see.
If they extend the invitation, we will gladly take him on the tour.
Catherine Coleman Flowers, thank you very much. Her latest book, Holy Ground, on activism, environmental justice, and finding, is available now. Thank you so much for joining us on Morning Joe. We really appreciate it. Up next, CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin joins us with insight on the markets amid a massive rally tied to President Trump's comments on China and the Fed chair. Also ahead, Elon Musk says he'll be spending less time with Doge. We'll tell you why he's making that move. Plus, Governor Maura Healey of Massachusetts is our guest at the top of the hour. And we'll wrap things up this morning with Grammy-winning singer Boy George.
Easy feeling about the state of the economy and therefore the state of the markets, which have been turbulent but mostly down now since the announcement of the tariffs, a month ago. And instability is something that markets do not like. And economies really don't either, because when people are uncertain about what the future lies, they're hesitant to invest and to hire and to do the things you need to have an economy go and grow, which is obviously what the president is seeking. So he may win in the end, but trade wars don't have a lot of history of working out very well for any party who's involved in it. So I think that's where the worry lies, now compounded by a fight with the Fed.
Yeah, Fox News chief political analyst Brit Hume earlier this week on the role President Trump might be playing in the turbulent state of the economy, Trump's economy. Welcome to the fourth hour of Morning Joe. It is just before 6 a.m. on the West Coast, 9 a.m. in the East. I have Jonathan Lemire here with me, and Molly Jong-Fast joins us for this hour as well. So there are a number of top stories we're following this morning. President Trump appeared to walk back his attacks on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, while the Treasury Secretary told investors the trade war with China is not sustainable. This comes as Elon Musk says he's going to be dialing back on his involvement with the federal government. Meanwhile, the president continues to stand by his Secretary of Defense despite the disclosure of a second group chat in which sensitive military plans were shared. We have two reports for you, starting with NBC News business correspondent Brian Chung.
This morning, some relief. After dramatic plunges amid President Trump's trade war, the market's bouncing back Tuesday.
Every sector closing firmly in the green.
As the administration signaled it may dial down the tension with China, the president saying the massive 145% tariff may be lowered.
It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero.
And the Treasury Secretary telling investors there will be a de-escalation. Trump also reassuring Wall Street by saying he has no intention of firing Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. But uncertainty has ruled the markets over the past few weeks as investors wonder what's next in the trade war. And companies have been impacted, including Elon Musk's Tesla, which said in its earnings report the tariffs adversely impacted supply chain. Tesla saying its net income dropped 71% compared to last year, as Musk says he's turning his attention back after 3 months of leading the Department of Government Efficiency.
Starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla.
The company saying demand for its cars may have been weakened by, quote, changing political sentiment. In recent weeks, there have been dozens of protests nationwide targeting Tesla for its association with Musk. The company's vehicles, dealerships, and charging facilities also targeted by vandals. President Trump even trying to rally enthusiasm for Musk's cars at the White House.
Tesla's a great company. I don't like what's happening.
After spending more than $250 million to help Mr. Trump's re-election efforts, Musk joined the administration as the head of the newly created Doge, aggressively cutting federal spending as well as the federal workforce, but quickly drawing criticism for dismantling government services. Musk saying he'll still help out Doge part-time, even as he reprioritizes Tesla.
I think I'll continue to spend a day or two.
This morning, President Trump standing by his embattled Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth personally downplaying the posts he made to a Signal group chat ahead of American airstrikes in Yemen last month.
I look at war plans every single day. What was shared over Signal, then and now, however you characterize it, was informal, unclassified coordinations for media coordination and other things.
But 3 U.S. officials with direct knowledge of the text exchanges say that, in fact, shortly before U.S. fighter jets took off to launch strikes against Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen, Hegseth took information passed up through secure channels from the head of U.S. Central Command, General Eric Kurilla, including about when the aircraft would take off and hit their targets, and sent it from his personal phone to 2 Signal group chats, the sources say, including one first disclosed this week by the New York Times, which included his wife, his brother, and his personal lawyer, the latter 2 Pentagon employees. John Bolton, who served as national security advisor in the first Trump White House, calling Hegseth a, quote, lightweight, adding he doesn't think he's long for the job.
Leads me to wonder what he's doing on the job on a minute-to-minute, hour-by-hour basis, that he's got time to knock out Signal messages to friends and family, which is what this group is.
The White House insisting President Trump has no plans to fire Hegseth.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth in the change that he is bringing to the Pentagon.
It comes as Hegseth is also dealing with the fallout from a leadership purge at the top of the Pentagon, with 3 senior officials fired last week, a former top spokesman departing, and his chief of staff reassigned. Hegseth blaming the fired officials for damaging leaks and negative news stories about his leadership.
I don't have time for leakers. I don't have time for the hoax press that peddles old stories from disgruntled employees.
That's our defense secretary. So we had Admiral McRaven on earlier, and he's got another book out, Conquering Crisis, 10 Lessons to Learn Before You Need Them. He's really become kind of an expert counselor on leadership and what it really means to be an effective leader. And in the cases of Trump and the tariffs and Doge, but also Pete Hegseth and how he is managing through this crisis, the Signal chat scandal, which is now made bigger by the second round of group chats that he had with family members about the plans to attack the Houthis. The one thing that's lacking that McRaven talks about when you are facing a crisis of leadership is accountability. And if you don't have accountability, you can't stand in front of the Department of Defense, in front of the military that you're in charge of, and say, you know what, I screwed up, I'm accountable.
Yeah,
I'm accountable.
There's been none of that. And the Admiral stressed about accountability, but also morale, and how those two things are linked, and how he is heard, and he assumes that morale is at Pentagon is in a really tough way right now.
And accountability is leadership.
No question. And we've heard the Secretary of Defense point the fingers at others, blaming leakers, ignoring the fact that the alleged leakers were some of his closest advisors, people that he wanted to be with him in that top echelon of the Pentagon. And instead, he's pointing the finger elsewhere, despite clearly egregious mistakes here. And as the Admiral said, the idea, and he would know, the idea that the White House's claim that this information was not classified just doesn't make any sense. So Molly, I want to turn back to Elon Musk, the other part of that package. He seems to be leaving with a bit of a whimper here. Yeah. He said, we played some audio from earlier on the Tesla call. He said he'd still be around now and then, day here, day there, but clearly his role is drawing down. And let's just talk about the legacy of Doge, where it has a lot, plenty of job cuts, plenty of chaos, but nowhere near the savings Musk promised. I mean, not even close, by a factor of a lot. They missed their goals, and a lot of it, even they've said they've accomplished, they got wrong.
Right. I mean, it was a lot of drama for not a lot of savings. And I think that's the top line. And look, the reason why now Elon is in the defensive is because Tesla's profits were down 71%. That is a crazy number. I mean, that is like just, is there a huge precedent for that? That seems enormous to me. And I think, look, he's now had to step back from this. And remember, they had numbers that were going to be humongous. They were going to save so much money, and it's been down, down, down. And I think, look, it wasn't popular. There were ways to do this in a way that wasn't so aggressive, that might have been, with a scalpel and not with a chainsaw. And instead, Elon went with the chainsaw and the drama. And I think ultimately it's reflected in these polling numbers. We're seeing this is just not a popular move.
A golden chainsaw at that. And certainly, look, there's some real-world ramifications here, the gutting of USAID. Among them, some of the other moves from Doge and the White House have been blocked by the courts. And now we've got a federal judge stopping the Trump administration from dismantling the government-funded broadcaster Voice of America, ruling that Trump's ending of the services were likely unlawful. Trump, of course, had signed an executive order seeking to gut VOA's parent organization last month. But now the administration has been ordered to restore Voice of America and other outlets. The judge argued VOA is funded by Congress and produces news for audiences around the world. Trump has previously attacked VOA and its partner outlets' propaganda, and Elon Musk had called for the agency to be shut down amid a flurry of Doge cuts. We've heard from so many experts actually talk about how important VOA is as a part of American soft power around the world. It seems like appeasing Donald Trump won't work. You write in part this: big law is learning this lesson. Columbia, too. Harvard, meanwhile, is putting on a masterclass in how powerful institutions can fight back. The university's decision to make the government's demand letter public was smart, because the missive drew quick blowback. According to the Wall Street Journal, there were even some on the right who publicly said it was overreach. The Trump administration is waging several different wars at the same time, from trade wars to culture wars, along with assaults on science, higher education, and public health. There is no way for one administration, especially one this incompetent, to fight so many wars at once, Molly writes. The lesson from Harvard is stay visible, stay loud, and stay fighting. That's the only way for institutions to survive what's coming. Molly, expand upon this a little bit more for us. We've talked a lot around this table about how Columbia,
right,
and that's my alma mater, caved and did so very quickly. And stirring a lot of outrage from professors, students, and alumni.
wide swath of things that, by the way, Harvard couldn't have agreed to even if it wanted to, right? It was just so broad. And you know it worked because A, donors rallied and they were like, yes. They stayed visible, so now they have power and they are an example. And then also you saw like just a lot of global kind of groundswell for them. And I think that ultimately it was a very smart move. And I think that you're gonna see that, you know, Columbia is now a captured institution, like these law firms. So they have to keep making deals. And once you're a captured institution, as we're seeing, right? Remember Trump with the law firms, he said maybe he wants them to represent coal companies now. Once you're captured, you're captured.
You're captured. And the law firms were the most surprising to me because they are law firms. Like,
and they'll win.
Come on. What is the deal? Joining us now, Democratic Governor Maura Healey of Massachusetts. She's a graduate of Harvard, co-captain of the Crimson women's basketball team, and is here to talk about this and a couple of other things. I really want to talk about what you guys are doing to help businesses dealing with tariff problems. But first, let's talk about Harvard. You actually have this post that you put up. Donald Trump's cuts to universities and hospitals means scientists are being laid off and shutting down life-saving research. It's bad for patients, bad for science, and bad for our economy. Give me a sense of your reaction to what is happening at not just Harvard, but beyond.
Well, this is bigger than Harvard, and I stand with Harvard. I support what they are doing. It is very, very important that Harvard file that suit and stand up to the bully that Trump is. But let me tell you how it's playing out, because it's not just at Harvard. It's attacks on colleges and universities, on research institutions across Massachusetts, across this country. And here are the consequences right now. So already, I was on the campus of UMass Medical just last week. Because of Donald Trump's cuts, they've had to lay off 200 faculty members. They've had to rescind offers to 80 graduate students. Mika, these are scientists, okay? These are people who are discovering and working on life-saving cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, ALS, you name it. And all of that is being shut down. Here's what also is happening, which Americans need to know. The ones benefiting from Donald Trump's misguided attacks on our universities and on research are benefiting China. China is recruiting right now on our campuses all those scientists and faculty members and students who've been laid off or had their offers rescinded and say, come to China, we'll build you that lab, we'll give you staff. So for a president who is about America first, he's making America last, he's making us weaker, he's making us less competitive, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to know that patients will suffer. They're already suffering, Mika, because we've had clinical trials shut down as a result of his dismantling of NIH funding, and that's compounded now by his effort to attack universities, and compounded by the attacks on our foreign students, right? He's scaring, for a guy who wants to reshore American talent, right? I mean, he is driving everyone, including American students and faculty members, out of this country because they want to be able to do their research somewhere. So this is a very dangerous situation, totally destabilizing, and it's really pointing America in the wrong direction.
It almost seems like self-sabotage in a way. When you look at all the different ways, everything that this president is doing is actually sabotaging this country. Losing scientists to China, losing students to other countries, losing all of the great, incredible things that we worked for years to build and develop and call home here in America, our intellectual drain now that is happening because of what's happening with the students, with the universities, with hospital, with science. So tell me, Governor, what is Massachusetts doing to fight back or at least help those who are impacted by such drastic cuts?
Well, we're doing a few things. In Massachusetts right now, we're the #1 state for education, healthcare, and innovation. So we really take these matters seriously. We're working hard right now with our universities, with our teaching hospitals, with our life science companies. We're the global hub of life sciences to figure out ways to shore up some of this. Obviously, state funding doesn't begin to make up the difference when the attacks are coming in this way from the federal administration. But we all have to work together, and I see that happening in our state. I also brought together recently a group of other businesses. You see, in a matter like this, we've got manufacturing all over this state that is about building the parts and the supplies that go into a lot of the research in our labs. So I've been working with them on how we can support them in this time. And in fact, can some of them manufacture some of the parts that our research institutions are having or have had to source from overseas that now with tariffs become prohibitively expensive. So that's the kind of work we need to engage in, but it is challenging. As a governor who cut taxes, as a governor who's building housing, you know, it is so disruptive that we have these tariffs where now my lumber is coming from Canada and the gypsum and other materials are coming from Mexico, and Trump just made housing a lot more expensive to build. And again, it's just another example of Donald Trump not showing up for everyday Americans, not delivering on results, making it very hard for governors like me who want to deliver for our residents, who want to grow the economy, who want to grow wealth, who want to build housing, who want to lower costs. He's running headlong in the opposite direction. And I don't know if it's, I don't know what to attribute it to, but we just see it in sector after sector, realm after realm. But again, I'm proud of our colleges and universities. You know, people have got to understand the research that was done at colleges and universities a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, it's changed the world. You know, it's why we have the life-saving cures that we have today and the treatments. It's why we have the cybersecurity and technologies for military capability that we have today. You cannot shut this off. And that's what Donald Trump is doing by attacking our universities.
Yeah, Governor, to that point, it's been really good reporting in recent days about the research to places that Harvard, MIT, and the like do, how that spills over into the economy there in greater Boston throughout the state. But you mentioned tariffs. Let's dive in a little more on them. Also, for some of the small businesses in your state, what sort of impact are you seeing now and could be seeing in a much more dramatic fashion with the China tariffs in place and potentially the pause going away if deals can't be struck with other trading nations as well?
Yeah, well, I've been convening with a lot of businesses, large, small, medium size, and almost universally the reaction is negative. It's hurting all of them. There are a few exceptions here and there, but you know, the other day I was with a woman from Western Mass who runs a manufacturing outfit, and she's had orders just completely stopped. So she said she describes herself as having a whiteboard that's usually full up with orders in business, and right now it is just a white board, okay? And that means she's had to lay off employees, which, you know, has an impact on the broader economy. That's the reality. The other thing I see is there's no capital being deployed in America right now. Companies are, understandably, with the uncertainty of this market and the roller coaster that he has us on, the whiplash, you know, I'm going to fire Jerome Powell. I'm not going to fire Jerome Powell. You know, I'm imposing tariffs. I'm backing off. That creates so much uncertainty for the market, for business, for investment. And that plays out real time in our states where, you know, companies aren't putting those orders in. As a result, our manufacturers and other smaller businesses are not getting the business that they're used to getting. And when they're not getting the business, they're having to lay off folks. And, you know, that's why this has got to stop. You know, he's got to stop.
So the consequences, Governor Healy, of this presidency are so severe, so early. I think it's worth talking about politics for a second. You talked about President Trump basically not showing up for the everyday American as he has promised to. I asked you about how Massachusetts is fighting back, but I'm curious how you think Democrats should put what is happening into words, especially when trying to talk to American voters who voted for Trump.
I think it's a matter of communicating, continuing to communicate Here's the action he's taken. Here's the consequence, right? Many of us celebrated Easter this weekend. Eggs are still over $6, for a carton. There are stories of people buying potatoes and painting potatoes instead, right? I mean, here are the actions he's taking, and here are the consequences. There's a reason your dad, who's a veteran, can't get care right now at the VA. That's because Donald Trump has cut VA funding, and as a result, doctors and staff have been fired. I mean, this is, I think, the work that Democrats need to do, and they need to stand up. They need to stand up for things like due process and the rule of law, which, may not mean much to people. It's hard sometimes to understand, but I think what people understand is the government in this country, and I'm in Massachusetts, we just celebrated 250 years the other day with a great Patriots Day celebration on the Green in Lexington and Concord. I think what Americans understand is that the government isn't allowed to come into your home at night and take you away without cause. The government can't drive up behind you as you're walking in on your way to work and take you away and put you in some prison somewhere. There are certain legal rights that this country was founded on that we need to respect. And I see some of the pushback coming in the lawsuits that have been filed. It's very important. I want to give credit to my colleague, Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, who got a very strong ruling just last week, because once again, when Trump was taking away funding for school food for kids in the state of Maine, she got a ruling that said that's illegal. He's violating the law doing it. And I just think that we need to continue to push back while articulating to Americans, here's what Donald Trump is doing, and here's why your 401k is continuing to go down.
It's great to have these governors on, especially you, Democratic Governor Maura Healey of Massachusetts. Thank you very much. And we recently had Janet Mills on, and she was fantastic, facing an onslaught of pressure from the Trump administration. Good to see you. Coming up on Morning Joe, stock futures are on the rise this morning after President Trump reassured markets by saying tariffs on China would come down substantially and that he didn't plan to fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell after all. But will that climb continue? CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin joins us next ahead of the opening bell. Plus, a new poll finds that more than 4 in 10 young Americans under 30 say they are barely getting by financially. We will dive into the latest numbers from the Harvard Youth Poll. That's next on Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Have a huge Game 3 coming up later this week against the Clippers. Back to the news now. The new Harvard Youth Poll was just released this morning. Let's dive into it. It reveals that younger Americans are facing significant economic strain, social disconnection, and deep divisions in their outlook on American society. And joining us now to help break it down for us, the director of polling at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University, John Della Volpe. He is also an MSNBC contributor. John, good to see you again. So tell us more about these poll results that seem to paint a pretty bleak outlook on American society for these young people.
Hey, thanks for having me back. This is the 50th survey that we've conducted in this long-running series all the way back, dating back to 2000. We captured the entire millennial generation and now Gen Z. I wish I had better news. This is a generation that is stretched incredibly thin financially, emotionally, politically. They've lost trust in our leaders. They've lost trust in institutions. I don't think there's apathy there, but I do think that unless we connect with them and listen soon, it's going to be much harder to win them back in the kind of in the political sphere, which is so important. We need them to participate, but I'm concerned about their level of disengagement and anger, frankly, right now.
So let's talk about some of that stemming from how they feel financially stuck. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, 40%, more than 40% of young people today say they are barely getting by, financially struggling. Only 1 in 7 or so say that they are comfortable. And what that means is when they say they are struggling, that means they're literally struggling to keep a roof over their heads. They're struggling to find a way to scrape together a few dollars for health insurance. And this could have dire consequences for young people. So the economic precarity is significant, and it is specifically seen among young women, among those who don't have a college degree or college education, and among the Hispanic Latino community in particular.
So part of that also, because of those financial struggles, it's young people, per your polling, delaying the idea of families, of starting a family, of parenthood. Tell us more about those findings.
Yeah, this was striking. There was a terrific series of questions that our students drafted on how important the following life goals are, and then how confident they might be that they could achieve these goals. And of course, financial stability was the most important goal, although slightly just more than half, maybe 60% or so feel confident they could ever achieve financial stability. But to me, what was striking is the fact that less than half of young people say that having children is a life goal. And I do think, based upon the focus groups I conduct, it's connected to the economic precarity. If you don't feel good about yourself, if you don't feel good about providing for yourself or eventually in a home, that impacts how you think about family planning.
Just really quickly, before you go, are these like the worst results you've ever gotten in the history of doing this, or where does it rank?
I think it probably is, to be honest, Mika, because the other thing is the disconnection, not just from politics, but from each other. We're seeing the kind of the long COVID effect, not just impacting people physically, but emotionally and through their mental health as well. Only 1 in 5 feel deeply connected to a community. Only 1 in 5. And those who aren't, we can see that majority struggle on a regular basis with their mental health. They're not asking for much. They're asking for us to just begin to listen and to engage and to hear them and work collaboratively on some basic solutions here.
Director of Polling at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University, John Della Volpe, thank you very much, I think. That is just horrific. Thank you, though, for sharing that with us. A lot to work on. More now on the intersection of the economy and politics. Let's bring in co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box and a New York Times columnist, Andrew Ross Sorkin, and chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. Andrew, I'll start with you. We have Trump blinking, or how would you describe it, on Besant and...
I think it's... Full blinking, lots of blinking like that.
Lots of blinking.
Lots of blinking.
Not a very validating environment for Wall Street, the business community, and anybody who cares about America's economy.
Well, interestingly, actually, the market's up this morning. I think a lot of folks actually think that he's blinking. Whether he really will blink, we don't know. But it is a 180-degree turn, both in terms of what he's suggesting about how he's going to negotiate with China. For the last several weeks, he's been playing the role of strongman. Now he says he wants to be nice and wants to find effectively a compromise, which is going to be interesting to see how the Chinese react to that, and will have either leverage over him or he'll have leverage over them. Meanwhile, he also made a 180 effectively on Jay Powell, something we've talked about in the last couple of days on this broadcast. He had been both on Truth Social and other places saying that he thought that the Federal Reserve Chair should effectively get fired, was too late, should have lower interest rates, and now he's saying, I'm not firing him. And I think he suggested basically that he was never planning to fire him, which is not what he said originally. So I think that the markets or investors are saying to themselves, okay, maybe there's a floor here because maybe Trump is now realizing he can't do all the things that he thought he wanted to.
Peter Baker, a lot going on and a lot of mixed messaging from the White House, whether it be on Pete Hegseth or on tariffs or on the Fed chair. I mean, the president practically changes his mind and you still have his press secretary pushing the thing that was happening 10 minutes ago. There seems to be, I mean, would you describe it as chaos? What are you hearing from inside the White House as to how things are progressing, especially in terms of these tariffs?
Yeah, I would describe it as Trump. This is the way he operates, right? He blinked yesterday. We'll see what he does tomorrow. The markets react to a short-term change in tone, but the truth is he could change it again by next week, and we just don't know. That's one of the things that's been most striking, of course, about this administration is that they don't follow a predictable path. Now, he doesn't want to be predictable. This is part of the way he likes to operate. He likes to keep people on edge. He likes to keep people guessing. He is willing to flip-flop. He is willing to pivot. He is willing to change direction depending on the way things seem to be going at any given time. He does react to market forces and so forth. He obviously did that previously with the bond market when it prompted him to pause these tariffs for 90 days. But we're not going to get these deals that he's talking about necessarily in 90 days, certainly not with 90 different countries, maybe memorandums of understanding agreeing to keep talking. And the question is, at what point does he declare victory and say, okay, we're doing enough, we don't need to have this volatility? But volatility is sort of built into the program here.
Andrew, it's Molly Jong-Fast. I'm curious, when we talk about blinking, do you think some of this had to do with this port data coming out of the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach, or do you think it was these CEOs meeting with Trump, or what combination?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things. I think mostly it was Scott Bessent and others pointing back to the bond market, pointing to the dollar. It's very rare, and I think we've also made this point, where you have the stock market falling, you have the bond market falling, and you have the dollar falling all at the same time. Typically, when stocks would fall, people might buy the dollar because that was considered a safe haven. All of a sudden, we were talking about not buy America, we were talking about sell America. I think that was something that ultimately weighed on him, and I think Scott Bessent clearly was able to influence the way the president's been thinking about this. You also had some of these comments that Scott Bessent himself were making effectively leak out yesterday about how he's hoping to make a deal with the Chinese. Having said that, there are no talks with the Chinese yet. So just as Peter said, what looks like a blink today could be something very different tomorrow.
So, Peter, last week the White House was really happy to be talking about immigration and deportations again. They think they're on firmer political ground there than other topics, particularly tariffs. But this week they've had to deal with another distraction, which is, of course, Signalgate coming back. Round two with Secretary of Defense Hegseth. We've been talking all morning, publicly at least, White House standing by Hegseth. Hegseth made the media rounds yesterday, got some approving nods for his appearance on Fox News, defending himself.
His chief of staff out, 3 other staffers out, his own former chief spokesman writing in your former publication, Politico, that Hegseth is basically a disaster and ought to be replaced. I mean, this is not the way a government organization, much less the Pentagon, with the most powerful military in the history of the world, is typically run. Trump has a little bit more patience for it now, in the sense that he doesn't want to be seen as firing somebody of that level. He knows he'd have to then put somebody else through Senate confirmation. That's not something he wants to do again. And it would be admitting that picking Pete Hegseth in the first place, which a lot of people told him not to do, was a bad idea. Remember, Hegseth, of all the different things that were said about Hegseth during the confirmation process, among them that was lost was that he ran these small veterans organizations, and even there they were seen as dysfunctional. He was pushed out. So if you can't run a small veterans organization, how are you going to run, the largest office building and the largest, bureaucracy in the world? And I think that, we're seeing the fruits of that at this point. But again, Trump is very resistant at this point to following what the chattering class, people like us, think he ought to do or think a normal president might do. And so in that sense, that may give Hegseth a little bit more running room. But it'd be hard to see him lasting for an awful long time.
Yeah, unless not being able to run the DOD is exactly the point. Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, and CNBC's Andrew S. Sorkin. Thank you both very much for your reporting this morning. And coming up, a look at some of the other stories making headlines this morning, including the Oscar-winning film that's currently seeing a massive boost in viewership. We'll tell you which one. racially motivated attack that killed 23 people back in 2019.
It's a remarkable moment there. Elsewhere, nearly half of all Americans now live in areas with unhealthy air quality. That's almost 25 million more since last year's report by the American Lung Association. It's also the highest number in the past decade of the report's history. Extreme heat, wildfires, and droughts are degrading air quality nationwide, and we should note this comes before potential cutbacks to the EPA and other government agencies.
Birth in the U.S. increased by just 1% last year and remains near record lows. More than 3.6 million babies were born in the country in 2024. The U.S. fertility rate is still well below what is needed to maintain the country's population through births alone. Economic conditions and a general sense of instability in the world are likely playing a significant role. And the data suggests some Americans are foregoing having children altogether.
Warner Brothers Discovery is taking the first step towards cracking down on password sharing for its Max streaming service. The company has launched an extra member add-on feature, which allows someone who does not live in the same household access the subscription. The add-on feature does cost, though, $7.99 a month, giving that user their own standalone account.
And the death of Pope Francis has led to a surge in viewership of the Oscar-winning film Conclave. Streaming of the film about the process of choosing a new pope increased 283% after the pontiff's passing on Monday. Since then, viewers have watched nearly 7 million minutes of the film. Meanwhile, Netflix's The Two Popes also saw a massive viewership increase, up 417%. A lot of interest in that, and we're going to be watching it play out in real time in the coming weeks.
And a great movie.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. Coming up, Grammy Award-winning singer Boy George and actor Jordan Fisher are live in studio with a look at their Broadway play, Moulin Rouge, the musical. Morning Joe will be right back.